Share the Load by Joanna Leggett. Job sharing can be a beneficial form of flexible work for both employees and employers, but without the right processes in place, it can easily go wrong. Article begins. Job sharing used to be a straightforward arrangement, a solid line between one person clocking off and the second one starting. A simple equation of two halves making one full-time whole. This is no longer the case. Joe Alilovic, author and director of employment law firm 3D HR Legal, says job sharing is unlikely to look the same in 2022 as it did pre-pandemic. I think what we will see in the future is more part-timers who have certain job share features to their work lives, rather than directly sharing the one role, she says. Instead of two people baton passing the work of one client, for example, it may be that each employee works on different aspects of the client's business, and that the shared work comes in the form of dual client management. Whatever the arrangement, the emphasis should be on creating flexibility for employees while ensuring clients' needs are met. You may not be collaborating on a piece of work together, but perhaps the arrangement is that you have someone cover for you when you're not there, Alilovic says. You are both working together to make sure you're getting the flexibility that you each want in your life, but also continuing to do a great job for the company. Alilovic perceives the modern job sharing arrangement as more about the work relationship than the work itself. We hear a lot of joking around about having a work wife or a work husband, and I do think there is something special about having a person at work who's got your back, she says. Such a job share arrangement in which two people are working together and are committed to supporting each other is a beautiful thing, she adds. It makes work so much nicer, and it means you can relax about the work when you're not there, she says. It can also mean that managers, contrary to what they may fear about job sharing arrangements, can be less hands-on. If you're an employer, it means that you've got less stressed individuals, and in some ways they're accountable now to each other, Alilovic says. So your management should in some ways decrease with regards to these people. Leadership advisor, executive coach, and partner at the Leadership Context, Patrick Pod O'Sullivan, thinks this modern style of job sharing aligns perfectly with the hybrid workforce. Most of us are now moving in an asynchronous work environment anyway, because we are no longer relying on people to be in the office from Monday to Friday, and we've set up hybrid work communication channels, he says. In fact, in many ways, job sharing is already happening informally among management. If you think about the concept of a leadership team, ideally executives are sharing the role of leadership across an organization anyway, O'Sullivan says. And if you buy into that, and I do, then everything else just flows naturally. O'Sullivan says leaders often fear job sharing will result in a lack of control at their end or a doubling up on management tasks. The classic first hurdle for the manager is the thought that they are now managing two people instead of one, he says. But if you set it up properly, then it can work really well. Both communication and clarity with regards to the shared roles must be established from the outset, he notes. There should be agreement among the two job sharers that their communication together has to be more overt than usual, he says. Secondly, both job sharers must have clarity on who is doing what and what the communication line is up to their leader. Job sharers need to establish who is accountable for which part of the role and how decisions get made by those two people, O'Sullivan says. They then have to be really clear about what parts they take responsibility for individually and what parts overlap. Alilovic agrees that communication between job sharers is essential and argues that a clear agreement should be in place between both parties as to how the role will be split and organised. This includes canvassing whether each person is contactable on days off, what happens when someone goes on leave, and when the arrangement should be reviewed. In all flexibility arrangements, I normally recommend at least a 3-month trial to give it a really good go, and then have some kind of formal review process, Alaluvic says. It's equally important to outline what should happen if the arrangement does not work out. Do you each go back to your previous roles or not? And what happens if someone resigns? These are all questions much easier to answer if the job-sharing relationship is harmonious to begin with. Alaluvic says, there has to be a good relationship between the two individuals to begin with, or it's not going to work. So it's important to have your person in mind from the beginning, so you know their level of competence and you can trust that person has your back and is not going to throw you under the bus when you're not there. This trust must also be ensconced within a broader work culture, which should be open and receptive to job flexibility. Alaluvic says, there needs to be a supportive culture in the workplace without a doubt. If you are not in an organisation that accepts flexibility generally, you're always going to be that job share person in the company, and you will have to cope with the negative beliefs about your ability to do the job properly. Unfortunately, negative perceptions about the ambition or competence level of job sharers persist. When O'Sullivan worked as a recruiter in the healthcare sector, he would often nominate 2 experienced female candidates for the one job, but some employers were hesitant. These women were very experienced and wanted to work part-time because they had a new child or even aging parents, he recalls. Organisations were a bit slow to embrace this, in my experience, as they figured out that it meant they weren't ambitious. The reality could not have been further from the truth, O'Sullivan says. They were more ambitious, in fact, because they were willing to compromise both aspects of their life. And my experience is that someone who's worked a job share 3 days a week invariably worked 4 days a week because they fit so much in, he says. Organisations that saw this and embraced job sharing did very well. O'Sullivan adds that job sharing among women may be a solution to the paucity of female C-suite leaders. We know that the pipelines into C-suite roles for women stalls between the ages of 32 and 39, owing to maternity leave. If we can solve the problem at this stage, we're going to have higher representation at those springboard roles into the C-suite much later. Perhaps most importantly of all, job sharing can act as a signifier to current staff and future employees that as an organisation you are flexible, that you value your staff and that you respect their life outside of work. Alaluvic said she wouldn't be surprised if there was an uptick in job sharing as employers embrace flexibility more generally. We have seen people enjoy and respond well to work flexibility and the added wellness they get from it. And it has a positive effect on the business. So I think from that perspective, employees are open to it. And in fact, they're not just open to it, they're starting to come out with their own policies and procedures.